Welcome to the channel, guys. When it comes to the Primarchs, whether through misinformation, misunderstanding, or just plain bias, these 18 demigods have been judged unfairly and inadequately in the past. An injustice we plan on correcting right now. We posted a YouTube community vote on the channel to see what content you wanted next, and the worst Primarch ever to exist was the winner. So good job, guys. This was a lot of fun to make whilst also being a challenge. I will preface this video stating that once I got through the first 9 Primarchs, my script was 20 pages long, which would equate to about 60 to 90 minutes of video for only half the Primarchs. So we've decided to break this down into 4 parts instead, for your sanity's sake and for mine. Of the 18 Primarchs we know to have existed, there are some which are obvious fan favourites, such as the Great Angel Sanguinius or his Dark Mirror the Red Angel, Angron, and others which have suffered from negative impressions by inconsistent writing or a lack of fleshing out within the lore, such as the laser-catching, sand-eating Ferrus Manus. What we're seeking to achieve today, while diving into the lore of each one of these superhuman brothers, is to form a considered opinion to end the debate on who in fact really is the worst Primarch. By the end of this video, part 1 of 4, we hope to have shed some clarity on which of the brothers was perhaps squandering their opportunities and abilities. To keep scoring simple as possible, each Primarch will be marked against 3 criteria, within a score range of 1 to 3, 1 being the lowest and 3 the best. The Primarch with the numerically lowest score will be considered the worst Primarch. Now, to give you an understanding on how we're approaching this scale, we'll measure each Primarch using these criteria. The first form of measure is in regards to a Primarch's achievements. These could be relating to military operations, where humanity's history was rewritten in the crucible of battle, or peaceful agendas in an age soaked in blood. Some Primarchs even planned beyond the military purpose of their legions. This application of their sons' talents will put themselves and their legion to assisting humanity and bettering themselves when not campaigning. I believe these are all important considerations when assessing the achievements of a Primarch. One major factor we must also bear in mind is considering fully half the Primarchs turn to chaos. Measuring these individuals' successes against purely imperial ideologies and achievements would automatically place them on the lowest 9 ranks. For this reason, let's keep an open mind and extend our criteria to more general characteristics and achievements, so we keep the playing field level. For example, terrible achievements can still be great in their magnitude. Secondly, the negative events a Primarch brought about through brash mistakes, an imperfect temperament at odds with the perfection of their gene crafting. It is easy to judge these actions retrospectively. However, we must keep in mind the Primarchs wielded great power and were not perfect. A misjudgment or miscalculation could have severe repercussions when commanding the military force of thousands of elite personnel and voidcraft. As most 40k lore addicts are aware though, there are quite the number of tragic and unfortunate events to choose from. As we noted earlier in the video, if we were to judge the traitor Primarchs on such a basis, they would all receive the lowest marks possible. In their case, we can assess the issues they caused whether purposefully or unwittingly during their time as loyalists, rather than once they threw their lot in with the Dark Pantheon. Lastly, we consider a Primarch's character and personality, and how at times these attributes affected those they were associated with, such as their brothers, legionary sons, or the imperium in general. We can to a degree lean on the wisdom of our ancient Greek philosopher, Aristotle. His teachings on what is a good person outline 4 main core traits. Aristotle states the 4 cardinal virtues to define a good person are wisdom, temperance, I feel like half the list just failed, justice, though not the Nostraman kind, and finally, fortitude. Clearly, the 18 Primarchs are not mere mortals, and their frame of mind and general grand scale of their plans and foresight is not able to be understood easily, though we can still do our best in trying. Now let's have a bit of fun, dive into the list, and discuss the Primarch who would become the most divisive of all, Lorgar Aurelian. Lorgar, despite ultimately falling to the sway of the Chaos Pantheon and orchestrating much of the Horus Heresy, actually contributed heavily to core imperial tenets that still exist at the very heart of the Empire of Man some 10,000 years later in the current setting. Firstly, and perhaps most profound of all, is the Primarch Lorgar penned the Lectitio Divinitatis, which even before the Horus Heresy, hailed the Emperor of Man as a god and insisted he should be worshipped by all mankind. This teaching survived the heresy, which was eventually adopted by the Ministorum itself and used to form the basis of the new imperial creed and a post-heresy imperium. In a science fiction setting chock full of tropes and irony, this truly does take the cake. One could easily identify this as a stellar achievement, one in which a loyal Lorgar would take enormous pride in. Lorgar in the current setting though, a demonic Primarch powered by the heretic forces of the Chaos Gods, means his past teachings are now weaponized by his mortal enemies as their greatest tool to stem the tide of chaos in the material galaxy. Of all the Primarchs, it could be said Lorgar truly wanted what was best for his gene sons and for humanity. Not only did he encourage the legionaries of the Word Bearers to follow their hearts and the paths they thought best for their own growth as individuals, he also in some cases would give heartfelt counsel to his sons, akin to a priest tending his flock. These superhuman soldiers would take the time and care to educate and foster the spiritual well-being of mere mortals, not only within Monarchia, but upon the worlds they reclaimed in the name of the Imperium. Their drive for doing this was not to reach some conqueror's tally. The Word-Bearers truly believed the worship of the Emperor as a divine being was the road to salvation as well as the path to a fulfilling life. Hence these Marines would invest the majority of their precious time not conquering planets, but fostering the belief systems of whole worlds. Lorgar, both before and during the heresy, was a man whose sole purpose was to devote himself entirely to a being of higher power. In dedicating himself utterly and extolling another's virtues and divinity, would Lorgar find true fulfillment, content in his belief that to do so brought spiritual enlightenment and also contentment. In living a life so utterly dedicated to the well-being of another, it is easy to understand why Lorgar would become depressed and outraged when his worship was denounced by his father, and why he would provide right pickings for the Chaos Pantheon through the manipulations of Erebus and Corpharon. Even during this time of transition, when Lorgar and his legion embark upon their dark pilgrimage, the chaos taint within Lorgar's psyche gradually takes hold before quickening substantially after his foray into the war. Though we still see his love for his legionaries and his brothers portrayed not only through his words, but his actions. We see this in the remorse he shows upon the death of his sons, the contact he maintains with his brother Magnus throughout the heresy, as well as his care for Angron. In corralling Angron towards demonhood, it would be easy to assume Lorgar's only intention to working closely and counselling the Primarch of the World Eaters was to provide capable fighters dedicated to the Blood God and a demon Primarch to help the traitor's cause. However, through the Black Library Horus Heresy novels, we truly do see Lorgar's care and affection for his troubled brother shine through. There is a great more that could be said for Lorgar, Primarch of the Word-Bearers and Lord of the 17th Legion, but whatever you do, do not make the folly of believing this devout individual to be of shallow development and characteristic. Lorgar may be the villain pinpointed for blame regarding the heresy itself, but his fall from grace and his subsequent never-ending quest for enlightenment in a galaxy riven by war makes a truly unique perspective on this setting through the lens of Lorgar's life and experiences. For achievements, we have scored Lorgar a 3, the highest possible tally. The man inspired the worship of the Emperor as a god, and going by recent lore, may have even succeeded in achieving this apotheosis for his father. He also orchestrated much of the Horus Heresy. Lorgar has accomplished a top-tier score in regards to his achievements, as they were immense in the effects they would have on both loyalist and traitor alike during and after the heresy, all the way up to the current era. Lorgar's achievements set the bar for any other Primarch brother. Considering unfortunate or negative ways Lorgar's time as a loyalist would affect humanity as a whole, the most prolific, could be said, was his fervent worship of the Emperor and the effect this would create within the warp. Whilst the Emperor's grand plan to unite humanity in a way that starved the Chaos Gods of sustenance through eliminating worship and religion by replacing them with the Imperial truth was understood and paid for in seas of blood, Lorgar would purposefully go against this creed due to the core tenets of his personality, as we've already outlined. The effect his continued disobedience in this regard would have is plain to see, in his willingness to take Erebus and Corferon's counsel regarding a higher power in the Chaos Gods, resulting in the Horus heresy at large. Conversely, and a stark counter to this effect, was his teachings of the Emperor's divinity prior to his corruption. I feel the two are quite fair counters considering the character we're discussing and the prolific effects both actions would have thousands of years into the future. For this reason, we've scored Lorgar a 2, a middling and well-balanced point to represent the strong counterbalance both these actions have to each other. Whilst a loyal Lorgar does possess a certain degree of altruism, he also proved extremely dependent upon religious worship as a linchpin to his own purpose of existence. He had the intrinsic need to pour such emotion into a being greater than himself, not even a purpose, but a being, that he would give himself wholly to religious devotion, and that in and of itself defines the greatest character flaw Lorgar possesses. If only Lorgar could have poured the same devotion into spreading the imperial truth and refuting religious practices throughout the galaxy, the Chaos Gods may well have been sapped of a lot more power in a much shorter period of time. When considering our metrics to measure the goodness of a being, we can say most assuredly a loyal Lorgar possessed all these qualities in fair measure. A wise and even-tempered Primarch up until his father's censure of his worship, we then certainly begin to see both these qualities degrade. Is it truly wise to believe interdimensional beings are gods fit for worship? We understand Lorgar's belief system had been torn down around him. However, in seeing Lorgar groping for meaning in life so desperately and settling upon the Chaos Pantheon does reek of desperation and almost self-pity. Lorgar's reliance on wholly devoting himself to a divine being to define his very existence, I feel drags down his overall character, as it so readily affects every aspect of his being. This, I feel, is deserving of a 1. This brings Lorgar's total score on our table of sociopaths to 6 out of a possible 9. Sanguinius, a beacon of hope for all mankind through a stark resemblance of past eras' religious symbolism by way of his angelic appearance. The noble Primarch Sanguinius would prove instrumental in the years throughout the heresy in ensuring the corrupted followers of Horus were ultimately defeated and that they paid for any small upper hand with rivers of their own blood. Of 18 Primarchs, Sanguinius was beloved by most and respected by all, for not only was he noble in demeanour, but his combat ability was quite probably second to none. Prior to the events that would constitute the Horus heresy, Sanguinius and his legion, the Blood Angels, would form close bonds of trust and vision. This was achieved through Sanguinius' ability to lead by example and to not praise himself or hold his status above that of his sons. This was achieved through Sanguinius' ability to lead by example and to not praise himself above his sons. You see, prior to Sanguinius' rediscovery, his legion were viewed as little more than monsters, loyal beasts who would be dispatched to battle horrors unsuited to more conventional types of warfare. This fact was not lost upon the 9th Legion, who bore this treatment with humility, though it pained them deeply. When their Primarch was discovered, not only did he do battle alongside them, but he would task his sons on campaign in such a way that they'd each realise their potential and inner nobility. They could rise above their dreadful reputation and build a new one, a reputation also born in blood. However, this time, the 9th would conduct themselves as noble warriors, the equal of any other storied legion of the Astartes. In fact, the change of purpose with which Sanguinius had gifted his sons over time meant the more established Astartes legions would look up to them as examples of true and noble warriors. Sanguinius and his legion would maintain their almost forgiving and generous approach to the worlds they made contact with during the expansion that was the Great Crusade. However, were a world to refute in a way that was dishonourable, the full and terrifying fury of the Blood Angels would be brought down upon them until their worlds were little more than gore-soaked charnel houses, proof to others that in the grim darkness of the future, even an angel's mercy has its limits. Sanguinius would again place the well-being of humanity before his own when at the gates of the Imperial Palace, against the wishes of his brother Dawn and even his own Astartes, Sanguinius would do battle with the corrupted foe on the front lines, a hell zone of mud, disease, and viscera. Here, the drafted citizenry of Terra, bearing little to no training in how to use their assigned equipment, would draw a line of flesh in the ground before the Imperial Palace to combat and slow the traitor horde's advance. Through the grace and beneficence of the Angel Primarch were many defenders' lives saved from needless expenditure, as Sanguinius would once again lead from the front. This would instill the Imperial defenders with purpose and meaning, raising morale across a picket line of rifle and bayonet. Aside from his various acts of mercy and sacrifice, Sanguinius would garner himself a respectable reputation concerning matters of personal combat, even amongst Primarchs. There are 4 duels concerning Sanguinius within the current story arc of the Horus Heresy novels that convey his effectiveness at close quarter combat. This excludes his soon-to-be-revealed final combat with Horus aboard the Vengeful Spirit. Some of the more prodigious combats he takes centre stage in are against the greater demon of Khorne, Kabanda, twice, a keeper of secrets, and his own brother Angron at the Siege of Terra. Of these 4 duels, Sanguinius is victorious in all bar his first bout with Kabanda, wherein he loses consciousness due to the psychic backlash caused by hundreds of his sons being murdered by the demonic general in one fell sweep. Lastly, when considering the achievements of Sanguinius, the established law regarding his final fight with his corrupted brother Horus aboard the Vengeful Spirit implies that Sanguinius gave his own life during this duel to create a weakness in Horus armor, which could then be exploited by the Emperor in an effort to finally push back the traitors from orbit above Terra. Whether this chink in Horus armor is a metaphorical term for weakening Horus mentally or spiritually, or whether it literally describes a weak point in the Terminator plate of Horus, this remains to be clarified at the closing of the Horus Heresy novel series. This is likely the most anticipated combat of the entire series since the release of Horus Rising in 2006. In summary of his achievements, the Primarch Sanguinius performed admirably during the Great Crusade. He was not as forceful and bull-headed in demeanour towards undiscovered worlds like some other Primarchs were known to be. And ultimately, if it were not for Sanguinius' personal efforts during the defence of the Imperial Palace, an argument could be made for a possible traitor victory. Not only battling tainted hordes of foul mutants for days on end, besting a greater demon of Khorne, and his demonic Primarch brother Angron, Sanguinius will earn a 3 for his achievements. By way of negative effects, the words or actions Sanguinius would have on the Imperium or humanity in general, there is nothing recorded in the Horus Heresy novels or short stories to this effect. Perhaps the most negative legacy of Sanguinius and his legion would be the genetic flaws of the Red Thirst and Black Rage. Considering though these flaws were out of Sanguinius' control, I don't feel they can be attributed to him personally when attempting to form an unbiased opinion of the individual. Considering these factors, we will score Sanguinius a 3 for negative events brought about by his own hand, as I do not recall and have not been able to find any that is fair to say could be attributed to him in any way. Regarding the personality of Sanguinius, what we know of his demeanour and morals throughout the Horus Heresy novels, it's hard to fault his choices or even his inner feelings when they're shared with the reader. When he, Guilliman and the Lion are gathered on Macragge, Gillen puts forward to his brothers the idea of founding what he terms Imperium Secundus within the Ultramar Empire of Worlds, with Guilliman wanting Sanguinius to be crowned de facto emperor. This is wholly due to the fact that warp storms have cut off accurate void travel as well as communication. The majority of loyalists across the galaxy, including these 3 Primarchs, are not aware whether Terra has been seized by the traitor forces or not. As for the proposed elevation of Sanguinius to de facto emperor, this type of elevation to an office of such high esteem does not sit well with Sanguinius, who is far too humble to consider himself an emperor of sorts. And in turn, this brings down a pall over the angel, who sees himself as an intruder to the true emperor of mankind. Were other Primarchs within the place of Sanguinius, I feel the possibility for ultimate corruption may well wind its way into their psyche over time, but not Sanguinius. It is hard to take advantage of power when you do not want to wield the authority it is associated with. Another consideration in regards to Sanguinius' personality was his refusal to the likes of Dawn, who pleaded with him to stay out of harm's way during the defense of the outer walls of the Imperial Palace. He would risk his own life to save innocent civilians, though he was also confident it was not his time to die, given visions he had been experiencing at the time. Taking into consideration these facts and events, Sanguinius proving himself quite incorruptible as well as humble, we will again score the Emperor's angelic son a 3. This brings Sanguinius' total tally to 9. I promise I'm not a Blood Angel fanboy, he just does the good guy stuff really well. Though to be fair, if anyone was going to set the bar high in a dark future of war and revenge, it should probably be the guy who looks like an angel. And remember, the purpose of this assessment is to find and justify who could be termed the worst Primarch. Before we continue on to Alpharius and Omegon, using the analytics provided by YouTube, over 85% of our viewers are not subscribed. Breaks my heart. If you do enjoy the video and want to be alerted when we release new and original content, hit the sub button and the notification bell so you don't miss out. If you do like it, remember liking and sharing helps recommend the content to others. So if you do want to be one of those day ones with us from the start, smash the sub button. Alpharius and Omegon. What can be said of the twins Alpharius and Omegon that we as a reader can know for sure? So much of what is known throughout the novels, codex and general lore over the years has proven to be grossly misleading, and I am Alpharius, lies and trickery to further enhance the secretive, taciturn nature of these Primarchs and their legion. When referring to canon in the 40k setting, Aaron Dembski-Bowden said it best when he stated during an interview, "It's all real and none of it's real." This turn of phrase is nowhere better applied than in reference to the ever secretive and subversive nature of the Alpha Legion and their twin Primarchs, Alpharius and Omegon. Though the Alpha Legion would fight just as hard as any other Astartes force to claim back the lost worlds of humankind during the Great Crusade, there was a distinct event in their history wherein the Alpha Legion's motives and allegiance all begin to skew into a state of what can only be termed chaos. As most avid lore fans will know by now, the Alpha Legion were approached by a Xenos council known as the Cabal. They'd inform the twin Primarchs of Horus' impending treachery through the use of advanced sorcerous technology called the Acuity, which would allow the Cabal to peer into future possibilities with great accuracy. The Cabal would use the Acuity to present the Primarchs with news of Horus' impending betrayal, along with 2 possible options the Primarchs could consider to aid the galaxy in what would be the greatest war against chaos to have ever existed. These foretellings of decisions to be made and the effect they would have were to either side with the Emperor in the upcoming conflict, or knowingly betray him by siding with his son Horus. With the Alpha Legion to remain loyal, this would lead to an Imperial victory, though with severe long-term drawbacks. The Emperor would suffer a grievous wound and be entombed within a life support device, unable to lead humanity the way he currently did during the Great Crusade. What is worse, over the ensuing millennia, chaos would seep back into the realm of man, ultimately dooming the human race, regardless of their past victory against the Pantheon's pawn, Horus. The second option, a far darker road to ultimate victory, was to side with the traitors and play the long game. This course of action was by far the most brutal and unforgiving. In opting to side with the traitor Horus, the Alpha Legion would take part in the tearing down of all the Imperium was or would ever be, leading to a galaxy-wide victory for the Chaos Pantheon. However, Horus would somewhat come to his senses and despise all he had orchestrated in the name of the Dark Gods. Over the span of 100 years, infighting between Chaos followers would result in the complete extermination of themselves and the entire human race, thus starving the Chaos gods of their main sustenance and providing the remaining races of the Milky Way galaxy an existence free of chaos taint. If you weren't aware, the Alpha Legion believed the Cabal, at least to a degree, they were comfortable in eliminating all members of their flotilla who were not Astartes, so as to ensure this secret was kept. This equated to the cold-blooded murder of thousands of human beings belonging to the army and the navy, which constituted the Alpha Legion's exploration fleet. Their acceptance of this decision also meant the Alpha Legion would campaign across the galaxy under the guise of traitors, again committing murder on a massive scale, as they even infiltrated the Sol system and Terra itself to sow discord and open the way for traitor fleets in the years to come. Now, I have a massive issue with this part of the storyline, which, in case you're curious, the events I just stated can be found towards the end of the Horus Heresy novel Legion. The Astartes, the Primarchs especially, are extremely xenophobic. They are so xenophobic, they have no qualms in eliminating entire alien species. Not just the fighting men, everyone. Why then would two Primarchs, paragons for humanity's cause, take a proclamation from an alien device to be true at face value? Yes, I know it showed them visions by way of a form of proof, and the Cabal claimed the Acuity was not capable of lying, but clearly it did, or at least was very wrong, because the Alpha Legion did side with Horus in an attempt to save the galaxy, which should have resulted in a chaos victory before the human race was wiped out, well and truly before our current setting in 40k. In a separate issue, or possible plot hole, why would a Space Marine Legion care about the continued survival of the galaxy if they and all humankind were not a part of it? It just doesn't make sense. I really do hope this is another case of gotcha, it's the Alpha Legion, and not a hurried conclusion to a Horus Heresy book to tie events together. Ultimately, for the case of this video, we'll assume the Alpha Legion Primarchs believed they were doing the right thing, but I'm not happy about it and have already thrown my toys off camera. Further into the heresy, the Alpha Legion would take part in the Isfane 5 drop site massacre. At this point in time, the Imperium was not aware fully half the legions were turned to Horus, and along with the Salamanders, Iron Hands and Raven Guard, the Alpha Legion Night Lords and Iron Warriors were dispatched to bring Horus to justice. In a tactic that is said very much echoes the techniques and misdirection utilised by the Alpha Legion, the loyal forces of the Iron Hands, Salamanders and Raven Guard would be caught in a pincer move with the Sons of Horus and Emperor's children to their front, and the freshly arrived Iron Warriors, Night Lords and Alpha Legion behind. What followed was a massacre of epic proportions which effectively prevented these three loyalist legions from adding their strength or assets to the wider defence of the Imperium. To add further insult to the badly beaten Raven Guard, agents of the Alpha Legion would infiltrate the Raven Guard's legion following their heralding defeat. Corvus Corax, having obtained pure DNA from the Primarch project, intended on using this with the Emperor's blessing to rebuild his numbers. The Alpha Legion operatives would ensure this did not come about, and after much hard work and sacrifice on the part of the Raven Guard and their Primarch, the successful formula would be contaminated by Alpha Legion operatives, resulting in the Raven Guard Astartes being mutated into horrendous, gibbering mutants instead of viable Marines. This is surely a major achievement by the Alpha Legion, even if it is one of subversion rather than a grandiose public victory. By utilising the skills held so dear to this legion, passed down by their twin Primarchs, a handful of Alpha Legion operatives were able to ensure the Raven Guard could not replenish their numbers, wasting the Primarch Corvus Corax time and keeping his legion out of the fight. The Alpha Legion, led by their twin Primarchs, would prove invaluable to the traitors' greater cause as various sleeper agents were activated to gather intelligence for the traitor fleet's advance and subvert the loyalist defences, even within the Imperial Palace. Though Alpharius would be killed during a duel with his brother Rogel Dawn of the Imperial Fists, Omegon, it is rumoured, lived on past the loyalist victory at the Siege of Terra. There are several claims Omegon was later vanquished by Rabute Guilliman and also killed in combat. However, this has never been confirmed in lore through any official canon and further contributes to the mysterious demeanour and motivations of the Alpha Legion to this day. When considering the potential disruption and tactical insight the Alpha Legion possessed to meaningfully influence the war efforts of either loyalist or traitor before and throughout the Horus Heresy, it is regrettable that they would opt to side with their traitor brethren due to the supposed visions of Xenos sorcerers. All in all, whether for the good of humanity or no, Alpharius and Omegon believed they were acting appropriately when deciding the path they did, so we can judge their achievements in this way. It is no small feat to plan such large-scale operations which negate the strength of an opponent on their home ground in the way Alpharius and Omegon did as the traitor fleets made their way towards the Sol system. If it were not for the efforts of the Alpha Legion during the outset of the heresy, Horus's fleets would have had to either bully their way to terror or resort solely to sorcery to try and mask their intentions and strength of numbers. One final consideration we must give to the Alpha Legion is their ability to operate in small squads, even single Astartes, away from the main command structure for extended periods of time. For a legion of thousands of Astartes who in general are drilled and brought up to conduct war in a combined arms approach, this specialization that also emphasizes independent thought is quite remarkable among the 18 legions and an achievement in and of itself. Though their achievements in line with the traitor cause were great, I do believe it is worthwhile noting the catalyst of all they did in the heresy was a result of a conversation with Xenos sorcerers which proved to not be reliable anyway. There could be a point made that in the Alpha Legion's divergence from the Cabal's plans in the latter stages of the heresy, this may have affected the overall outcome compared to what the Acuity foresaw, but there is no way to know for certain. For these reasons, we'll rate Alpharius and Omegon's achievements a 2 overall. With reference to the twin Primarchs' influence over any negative or obstructive behaviour or actions throughout the Great Crusade and Heresy, this could be considered nothing if not a loaded question. The Alpha Legion was said to have Astartes agents active within every one of their cousin legions, and as we see within the Horus Heresy, they certainly had a high quantity of very influential and key personnel throughout the many institutions of the greater Imperium. Whether this is due to a pragmatism lending itself to the theoretical scenario of having to fight a campaign at some point, such as the one undertaken in the Horus Heresy, or whether this was due to a need of Alpharius and Omegon to access information they may not otherwise be deemed able to attain, who can say? These covert agents would certainly have a negative impact on the loyalist war efforts as far as we can tell, though again, we cannot judge the traitor Primarchs against loyal credentials lest we stray too close to a loyalist outlook in general. Considering the lack of solid established lore and information we do know concerning Alpharius and Omegon and their legion, I feel we need to again refer to their decision to so willfully join the ranks of the traitor legions. One of the reasons this is such a pivotal moment, if not only for the Alpha Legion, is the Alpha Legion were always such an unknown element at play. Even after Alpharius pledged his legion to Horus' cause, the War Master could not be certain whether the Alpha Legion were working in his best interests and really had no way of telling due to the beguiling way the Legion, as a whole, operated. Armed with the knowledge of Horus' impending war, the Alpha Legion Primarchs could have utilised their extensive spy network and unknowable force capabilities to perhaps stop Horus from even reaching Terra. I'm going to attribute a score of 2 again, as the hard data is just not available to justify an extreme high or low score, and we must remember Alpharius and Omegon did believe they were doing what was best for the galaxy overall. You could even argue this way of thinking shows greater consideration than all other Primarchs in the way Alpharius and Omegon opted to prioritise the needs of the galaxy's inhabitants over just one species. Though the twin Primarchs were not overly callous or possessing of a disregard for their mortal followers and operatives, they were nonetheless so invested in achieving particular end goals and objectives that to expend the lives of their followers was considered a fair price to pay, though this was always a calculated loss of life. We do experience their operatives possessing the same outlook, however, which can be expected of those highly skilled to be considered agents and undergo missions in deep cover among a potential enemy, so this could also be taken into consideration. During the Great Crusade and the Heresy, Alpharius, Omegon and their Gene sons relished the opportunity to display their tactical acumen as well as their superior strategic understanding against great foes and difficult theatres of war, to the point where the majority of other legions and Primarchs would condemn what they perceived as either unnecessarily long and drawn-out campaigns or a coward's way of conducting war. Needless to say, this forced the Primarchs of the Alpha Legion to distance themselves from their brothers even more than they were by way of their reticent nature. Given these facts, I do not believe we could score the twin Primarchs lower than a 2 when contemplating their character and personality. This brings Alpharius Omegon to a grand total of 6 on our chart. This is equal to Lorgar and 2/3 the total of the noble Sanguinius. Now guys, comment below on whether you agree with this list so far. I know it'll probably get the ire up of some die-hard fans of particular legions, but we're trying to be factual and logical as possible. Next, we'll dive into the nature of the Lord of the Valka Fenrica himself, Leman Russ. How do you think Leman will fare against this scale, given we've discussed 3 legions Primarchs so far? Leave a comment below with your anticipated score and what you believe Leman's greatest achievement was. It could easily be said the Space Wolves and their Primarch, Leman Russ, were some of the more compassionate of Astartes regarding their role in safekeeping humanity. Consistently, throughout the 10,000 years of their existence, whether it be a heresy or 40k setting, we see Space Wolves defending the citizenry of the Imperium from foul Xenos or even the Imperium itself. When considering how the Space Wolves have furthered humanity's cause prior to or around the Horus Heresy, we can safely assume the Space Wolves would have limited innocent collateral within active war zones, though there are not a great many accounts of Space Wolves furthering the Imperium's or humanity's cause in major, substantial ways during the Heresy era. During the tumultuous times of the Horus Heresy and prior, Leman Russ contributed to events that would have a resounding impact on both the war effort between loyalist and traitor. Though Leman Russ was widely known for his bravado and savagery both, the Wolf Lord, to those who were more astute, was known as being a very calculating and misleading personality, preferring to allow most to assume his character and wit matched his barbaric appearance. As we see in events such as the Council of Nicaea though, Leman Russ was extremely wily and dogged in the pursuit of what he would consider the truth or best course of action. One of Leman's major contributions outside of the standard "how many planets have you conquered" routine was his hard stance on the banning of practicing psykers within the Space Marine legions. This belief would be acted upon during the Council of Nicaea. As an aside, interestingly, Leman's opinion did not include his own psykers called Rune Priest, but that's one for another day. Considering Leman Russ' standing within the Primarchs and his positive relationship with the Emperor, it could be assumed that Leman Russ could and would have rallied a considerable number of allies to his corner. I wouldn't at all call this an achievement of Russ's alone, as the conclave was convened and overseen by the Emperor himself, and if anything, the verdict likely caused more damage to the Loyalists in the ensuing conflict during the Heresy. This is because the traitors, having thrown off the shackles of imperial rule, were free to govern themselves as their Primarchs saw fit, whilst the Loyalist Legion was still beholden to previously passed verdict. We witnessed this inability for Imperium forces to utilise their librarians against the traitor legions and warp powers in the Imperial Fist Legion as Rogel Dawn locked up his capable psykers aboard his flagship, the Phalanx, detaining them, as per the Emperor's wishes, up until he deemed the situation dire enough to set them upon the traitors during the Siege of Terra. Needless to say, when combating Astartes and warp-fueled forces, a natural counter in the form of trained and capable loyal librarians would be of great benefit. Perhaps the greatest accomplishment of Russ was achieved on the back of one of his greatest follies. In a time where Horus traitor forces were burning their way across the galaxy, their arrival at Terra inevitable, the Wolf King would opt to leave the defense of Terra to his brothers Dawn Sanguinius, and Jagatai. He would take his legion and hunt for his fallen brother Horus among the stars, despite the protestations of his fellow Primarchs and even Malcador. Whilst Leman would not succeed in his quest to execute Horus, he would wound him severely, resulting in much turmoil within the traitor ranks during a time they could ill afford such division. On the other hand, Leman Russ would be wounded badly, and much of his Space Wolves Legion destroyed, having to sacrifice themselves in a fighting retreat to protect their Primarch against the vast array of traitor capital vessels. Had this Legion and Primarch, famed for their aggressive combat abilities, been present on Terra, fortifying with the likes of the Imperial Fists, Blood Angels, and White Scars, the Loyalist forces would have possessed far more tactical flexibility in the ensuing siege, rather than resorting to manning the Imperial Palace and holding out for other legions, such as the Ultramarines or Dark Angels, to arrive. Had this Legion and Primarch, famed for their aggressive combat abilities, been present on Terra, fortifying with the likes of the Imperial Fists, Blood Angels, and White Scars, the Loyalist forces would have possessed far more tactical flexibility in the ensuing siege, rather than resorting to manning the Imperial Palace and holding out for other legions such as the Ultramarines or Dark Angels to arrive. Reflecting upon these actions, I do feel the brash and at times impetuous nature of the Wolf King did supersede his wiser moments and his own perceived good intentions within the lore. For this reason, we'll score Leman Russ a 2 for achievements. This one saving grace in these criteria stopping me from awarding him a 1 is the fact that he would almost succeed in slaying Horus. Now, I need to tread lightly lest the wolf lovers rage at me, but Leman Russ, like a lot of Primarchs, would have his fair share of ups and downs when it came to being his turn in the spotlight throughout the Horus Heresy and Great Crusade eras. Whilst the Primarchs were capable of a great many amazing feats, a great many could be hot-headed. Not the greatest mix of characteristics when you command a system-leveling military force at your fingertips. Leman would achieve a great feat in the wounding of Horus, as this no doubt helped to sow division throughout the Sons of Horus Legion, and therefore the spear tip of the push to Terra. Counterintuitively, this foray to find Horus would leave the defenders of Terra to face the combined might of at least 5 united traitor legions and their mutant and demonic allies. This risk was known and accepted by the King of Wolves, which needs to also be taken into consideration. Were another Primarch and Legion upon the walls of Terra, I do feel the tactical flexibility this would have afforded Dawn's defenders could have drastically changed the nature of the Siege of Terra. This is because the number of Astartes present could very well have given the defenders the skill and numbers required to be more aggressive in their defense, rather than manning the walls of the palace and committing to a fighting retreat. Considering negative impacts Leman Russ had on the Imperium in general, during the Great Crusade and Heresy and even afterwards, we must remember Leman Russ did impart his sons with a strong moral code, which has seen them maintain the role of one of humanity's key defenders for the last 10,000 years, and this point must be kept in mind when considering some of his faults in the past. As we discussed earlier in the video, Leman Russ would lobby heavily for the banning of psykers whilst maintaining that his rune priests should not be counted among those on trial. The restrictions on the use of psykers that the Verdict of Nicaea imposed upon the Space Marine legions meant that during the heresy, loyalists were not able to utilize their strongest weapons capable of countering warp-fueled magics, the Space Marine librarians. As we've mentioned at length now, he would also leave the defenders of Terra to attempt to stop Horus in his tracks, whilst if Leman had succeeded, this would have been a mortal blow to the traitor campaign and would likely have led to the dissolution of the traitor forces' combined approach. It still would not have done much to stop the other legions from reaching Terra intact, should they really have wanted to, and was really an all-for-nothing gamble when a more conservative and considered approach should have been taken. All things considered, I do feel the negative outweigh the positive when assessing the impact Russ's decisions would have on the wider Imperium. For this reason, Russ has scored a 1 out of 3 for negative impact through his own coalition. Regarding Russ's treatment of his brothers, whilst the Wolf Lord certainly played the arrogant savage, there was another side to him, one of loyal protector and loving brother. During the disagreement on Genna between the Space Wolves and the World Eaters legions, we see Leman Russ trying his best to reel in the violent excesses of his Primarch brother Angron. At this point in time, Angron's self-loathing and lack of remorse for his genetic sons was taking a great toll on the galaxy in general, as the barbarity in which the World Eaters' forces approached the Great Crusade was sliding ever closer to whole-scale slaughter rather than a beacon fleet of illumination and unification. Though this action leads to both legions fighting one another and drawing blood, it can be said for Leman that he did try his best to help his misled and often misunderstood brother, whether it was wise to do so or not. We see another instance of love for his kindred when Leman Russ ambushes Horus prior to the Siege of Terra and sees the two dueling on Horus' capital ship. Though Horus would ultimately win this combat, it's said that Leman Russ could have landed a killing blow, though he did hesitate, witnessing his true brother still existed beneath the Chaos taint. If indeed Leman Russ were a merciless savage, as some would believe, in both these cases the Wolf King would have lived up to his own appointed title of Executioner and done his best to finish his brothers and their legions during these bouts. Though his shortcomings were varied and a number came to the fore during the heresy, Leman Russ would make Aristotle proud. A will for justice, even if he is the one to administer it. Though Russ's temper was legendary in and of itself, it was indeed outweighed, at least in our opinion, by his more positive traits. I don't believe it could be said Leman was a poor brother or unkind to those he dealt with. Unlike his drawbacks considered previously, when Leman came to blows with the likes of the Lion and Angron, he was able to either laugh it off or not bear a grudge, as his bonds of kinship were far more important. Likewise, in his dealings with mortals and other Astartes, Leman Russ was honourable. He was a true defender of humanity, even if sometimes his choices were ill-advised. We will score Leman Russ 2 for the criteria of character and personality. This is a total of 5 for the Wolf King. Mate, you've only made it a quarter of the way. We still have 14 Primarchs to consider and rate. However, they'll have some stiff competition for worse considering how lowly poor Leman's score is. Do you believe Sanguinius' high score is overrated, or do you agree based on his achievements and actions throughout the Horus Heresy? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I really like reading them and I always reply. Make sure you like and share the video so it gains popularity with YouTube's algorithm. It greatly helps us grow as a channel. Have a good one, take it easy.